Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
Coming how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear.
Push me down, Josh.
Koala bear.
Push me down, Josh.
Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Koala podcast. And we're on January the 8th. And in this episode, we've got Matt Brockmeier, who's based somewhere up in the mountains in Colorado. Matt is part of the Antithesis group of psychedelic lawyers. And we're just going to talk to him a little bit about his background and also talk to him about what everybody's getting overexcited about at the moment, which is the Colorado Psychedelics program, which is already doing its, I noticed in LinkedIn post yesterday, it's already doing a step back. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. We want to tighten that up and all this sort of stuff. We'll have a whole year of that excitement. But anyway, let's start when everybody's feeling positive at the beginning of the year and see where it leads us. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on the Koala podcast. Firstly, what led you to become, are you just doing psychedelics law, or did you do cannabis law? What's the background?
So not just doing psychedelics, but attempting to focus on this new space. I'm still reluctant to call it an industry, but it's
No,
because
I don't want to ever call it an industry. That
Right.
scares the bejesus out of me.
And so I did have a cannabis practice for a couple years. I was a bit late to the game in cannabis. I moved to Colorado after adult use had already been legalized, and the stores were open when I got here. That was probably not a coincidence. I was living in DC at the time, worked on the Hill briefly, and then was at a think tank called the Law and Economics Center, and then did some management consulting. I did all the DC type jobs, and then realized, oh, I shouldn't even live here. That's why I keep jumping around. So I moved to Colorado when they legalized adult use cannabis because I have always since I was an early teenager, was introduced to that plant. And so I knew, even though I was a product of the Dare generation from a small Midwestern town and a loving but politically conservative family, I knew that we were being lied to. And so I had just graduated from law school in 2009. And, they told us that the supremacy clause wouldn't even allow a state to legalize cannabis. And then, Colorado, Washington, Oregon just went and did it.
Yeah, and as I said, the sky didn't fall in, did it?
No, and there were some raids, early on, but because of something called the Cole Memo, which maybe you and your listeners are familiar with, there was kind of some guidelines from the federal government as to how to not get arrested for operating a state legal cannabis business. And as a young lawyer, who had also just gotten sober from alcohol, I've been sober for like 9 years. I thought that was about the most interesting thing you could think of. So I moved to Colorado. I got sucked back into doing more healthcare when I got here because I had just gotten married and I needed, I had a mortgage and needed to pay the bills. And I got a really good job offer from a prestigious AmLaw 100 firm, and very quickly confirmed my suspicion that I did not belong in that.
I know.
environment.
Well, I say this in most shows. I've been in legal publishing since the mid '80s, and I did the big legal publishers, and it was like putting a drill into your head on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think it was where I was in my life and the practice group I was in, and it just wasn't a good fit. I don't want to badmouth anybody, but I found myself, closer to where I wanted to be in the cannabis space, but I was also pretty disappointed in how we kind of over commercialized that plant and forgot that it's medicine and didn't treat it with the reverence and respect it deserves. And, this high THC garbage and irradiated prepackaged weed, and there's heavy metals and toxins and mold and stuff in it. And I feel like we have this opportunity in front of us in Colorado with psychedelics and in some other states to at least avoid the same mistakes, with over consolidation and over commercialization and celebrity endorsements instead of focusing on the quality of the plant and the people who are
Well,
buying
and
it.
also that other word which industry or business loves to suck out of these compounds is fun. You know, the reason we all started doing this stuff because it was fun and it was
Yeah.
like liberating and but those words are like locked away in a safe, aren't they?
Yeah, and then we have to call it medical or recreational. It's like, guys, it's both. We
Yeah.
people just want to feel good, and that's what drew me to cannabis. And I don't even feel like most of the dispensary weed, not to get off topic, most of the dispensary weed just leaves you feeling like you're on another planet with that, 30% THC, even though we know it's not really 30% because those
Yeah.
numbers are inflated, and it's like a lot of problems
And
with that.
so on and so forth. Oregon's got a program, Washington's sort of attempting a program, Colorado's about to start a program with psychedelics. Do you think we can avoid some of those problems, issues? I mean, they do, all three states seem to be approaching it, with a healthcare issue first, but ahead of everything else, don't they?
Yeah, so to draw a distinction initially between Oregon and Colorado, Washington was one of the early movers with cannabis, but they're not really making much progress in
No,
psychedelics right
just a
now.
couple of cities have
Yeah,
decriminalized,
yeah,
haven't they?
yeah, and some cities in Massachusetts, and then Massachusetts had the recent ballot initiative that didn't pass. But so right now we're looking at Colorado and Oregon. Oregon is a non-therapeutic, non-directive approach, and you can't, even if the facilitator has an advanced degree as a psychotherapist or something, they're not allowed to avail themselves of the privileges of that degree while they're performing the facilitation. We did something different. We have the dual licensure track. So in Colorado, you can just be a facilitator, and that means you have a high school degree and you completed a state certified training program with like 160 hours of content. Or if you already have another degree from the state of Colorado, you can be a clinical facilitator, and that means you can basically like add mushrooms to your like psychotherapy practice. And so really there's a bit more of a health care or a mental health angle in Colorado, but it's not, in neither place is it tied to a diagnosis, and you don't need a prescription from a doctor in either place. But what's cool about Colorado, in addition to the Rocky Mountains and all kinds of nature and stuff here, is we added the personal use protections. And so we have a ballot initiative process, and that's why we were able to do this. And so voters told the state simultaneously change the criminal code to legalize possession, cultivation, consumption, and gifting of 5 plant medicines: psilocybin and psilocin from mushrooms, DMT primarily found in ayahuasca, but other plants, mescaline not from peyote because that's a Native American sacrament, and ibogaine. So those effective 2 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago, were legalized for basically personal use, not for sale, right? So I can grow them in my house, I can carry them around, I can take them in private, not in public, and I can give them to my friends. I just can't sell them. We'll
And
get to this in a
have those rules been abused at all? Because this is the problem with
so, yeah, a little
creating this
bit.
stuff, and then somebody comes from out of state, and then suddenly, underneath their house
A
or
little bit.
whatever.
The personal use law does limit like the size of the cultivation space. It's like 12 by 12 in your home, and in an attempt to prevent diversion. And you're not allowed to receive even remuneration. So it's broader than just sales. You're not allowed to trade them for, barter system or whatever. And they're not allowed to be sold in conjunction with a commercial transaction. So what we saw very early on, and this is really predictable, was somebody selling stickers, and the sticker was $40, and then, oh, look at that, the sticker's tucked in a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Now, I as a person do not have a problem with that. As a human being, I think it's ridiculous that we have to ask permission from the government or get a license for consuming or buying and selling a product that a lot of anthropological evidence suggests that we as a species co-evolved with over the millennia. But as a lawyer, I understand the need for that because we don't have effective communities to really self-regulate and police these things the way we should and the way that we once did not that long ago. Maybe 70 years ago, we had smaller communities, you knew people, and reputation and that sort of risk kept people from putting undisclosed chemicals or staples in these
Well, this is the
products. But
issue these days, isn't it? I mean, people just, as soon as they see something, a system they can abuse,
Right.
there's a certain percentage of people who are always going to give it a go, aren't they?
And in a new industry like cannabis and now psychedelics, we're still stuck in this larger capitalist environment. And so it's only a matter of time, unfortunately, unless there's specific protections. I think it's just inevitable that these get kind of become the victim of late stage capitalism. So I'm excited about the fact that if in Colorado, if you want to access mushrooms, you do not have to buy them. You don't have to go to a state licensed anything. You can just grow them or get them from a friend. If, however, you don't want to do that, you're not in a community like that, or you want the imprimatur of state regulation and safety because you think, I don't know how anyone would still think this, but if you think that the state regulating something means it's safe, well, then first of all, I've got a lesson. I would like to have a conversation with anybody who still believes that. But whatever, there are people who want to have a regulated, and a contained journey, and that's great. That's what these healing centers are for. Or people with a little that are working through something a little bit heavier, right? Then they may need some professional help or somebody with a little bit more training to get through some real trauma. But this system that we've created, and I think it's the model that people are copying now, it really meets people where they are and provides multiple points of access. And I don't think it's either or. I think there are going to be some people that access mushrooms in a more recreational setting. A friend gives them to them at a party and they go, wow, I really like that. I think I'd like to go deeper. And they'll cross over to the regulated system. Or there are going to be people who access mushrooms via the regulated system and go, that was great, but I don't think I need to spend $3,000 and have a prep session, an administration session, an integration session, and all that. I'm just going to go get some mushrooms and walk around in the woods. And I think that's all great because it's all leading us, all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to ending the drug war, this human rights catastrophe, this abject failure, and this war on people.
With regard to the actual program, where do you think they're trying to get to?
Oh, I mean, first of all, this was a ballot initiative. So this wasn't really like the legislature going, hey, this is something we want. And this wasn't the regulators going, hey, this is, a great idea for the people of Colorado. This is the people of Colorado saying we have a constitutional
But I presume
right.
they now have to solve this problem and create an
Yeah.
administrative process which
So
in turn becomes political.
yeah,
By its very
so we're
nature.
twisting their arm a little bit, I think, because just like cannabis, I don't think many I shouldn't paint with too broad a brush, but we are seeing some pushback in more conservative towns about like time, place, and manner restrictions for these healing centers. So they're in the business of control, right? We all know that. That's what the government does. They collect taxes and well, they collect taxes from everyone and they funnel them to very few people, a small minority of select, pals. And they also keep things under control, or at least they're trying to. I think that illusion of control is kind of being seen for what it is these days now. What do they want? I think that what they want is, and don't get me wrong, the specific regulators from the Natural Medicine Division, they used to work in cannabis. I've been working with them for a couple years. They're very dedicated. They're bright people, and they're committed to getting this right because I think they believe at this point, even if they didn't initially, that this is actually going to help people. But what they want to see is nobody gets hurt. What they want to see is this doesn't go sideways. They don't want to look like the cat's out of the bag and now everybody's on mushrooms and they're all high or something, which is not going to happen because it didn't happen with cannabis. And this is even more tightly controlled and regulated and contained. But that's what they want. And then what do the people want? I think customers want better options. They want a government that listens to them, and they want to be able to access substances that are safe and well tolerated without the threat of going to jail. And then what do business owners or therapists or licensees or however you want to characterize them, what do they want? They want a clear path to supporting themselves or making a living doing something new and exciting that's going to help other people. So there's different objectives for different stakeholders.
And then here's a question for you, because I've only interviewed half a dozen lawyers who practice in psychedelics, so it really is a completely nascent area of law. what sort of work are you getting? Do you want to get? Are you expecting to get? And how do you develop that work? Because the idea of it, we're literally what, 24 months. When I first started trying to find psychedelics lawyers 4 years ago, I think I could, a bit like cannabis 15 years ago, I could find probably 40 or 50. I'm getting up to 200 plus now. And I presume in a year and a half's time, the big firms will start throwing their little bits in and all this sort of stuff. So it's just really interesting to know not Richard Scarey's busy town. What does a psychedelics lawyer do all day? Because they just imagine you're probably sitting around in the clouds. But it's interesting to know what sort of work. Is it litigation? Is it trying to get in front of the courts to open up thought about how we engage with these compounds?
So I do live at like 8,000 feet, so I am kind of up in the clouds. But no, I
Yeah.
don't sit around taking these substances all day. In fact, I'm kind of on. I mean, I'm kind of on like the Ram Dass path. I think Ram Dass was like, you graduate from psychedelics, and Tim Leary was like, you don't graduate. I do mostly yoga and try to eat healthy and don't treat
No,
these
I'm
things
with
like
you
candy.
totally.
But
So, your thinking only comes really about 20 years later, I've really found
I
out
guess
after,
I
a
didn't
lot of
get into
this
these
back in
until
the 80s and 90s.
I didn't get into these until my late 30s, but I guess I'm a quick study or something. I don't know. So what do I do all day though? Well, not a lot of, first of all, not a lot of litigation yet because, there has to be a contract and a disagreement and then a lawsuit for there to be litigation, and we're just not even there yet. But we'll get there, unfortunately. I do draft a lot of contracts there for whether it's I mean, some of my clients are nonprofits, they're like education platforms, others are like ancillary service providers. Maybe it's a tech platform for record keeping and like integration that a therapist practice wants to use to kind of alternative electronic health records. Others are like retreats that are not like licensed healing centers in Colorado. They're more like wellness focused, but there may be some medicine work taking place on site. It's always on private property. And so different medicines too. So we're obviously, for the most part in Colorado, we're talking about psilocybin or the prodrug psilocin. But I also have a lot of ketamine therapists or clinicians or clinics who I talk to about, okay, I have a DEA prescriber license and I'm a psychotherapist, the license by the state of Colorado, but I also want to work with psilocybin. Should I, work under personal use? Should I go get a license as a facilitator, as a clinical facilitator? Should I work in the underground because I don't want to jeopardize my DEA license? Like all kinds of those issues. We have some international clients. Some of them are making tryptamines that may or may not be legal in the United States. Obviously, we have this kind of dysfunctional Controlled Substances Act with also the Analog Act. So novel research chemicals, it's virtually impossible to know before you're arrested if something's actually even legal. And we try to work through that with a lot of clients. A lot of clients are wanting to sell things online and aren't sure what's legal. And, I'll talk to them about, a lot of these same issues with the Analog Act, federal and state law, kind of those conflicts.
So a
Yeah, I
lot of this
mean,
stuff is undefined language that really you're defining first before the authorities, inverted commas. When people ask you these questions, are you feeling as though you're in the middle and you're having to talk to Colorado government about some of these things? I mean, there's no written law. The judiciary, I presume, are absolutely clueless on these issues.
so yes, and we would like to keep these things out of court, right? And
Yeah.
so we want to be. I'm also a board member of the Psychedelic Bar Association, which is not just a trade association for lawyers who work in psychedelics, but it's an association for lawyers who have been who have benefited from psychedelic experiences and want to incorporate that into their practice, whether they work with psychedelic clients or not. So psychedelic lawyering is we trademark that actually. And so trying to think about like a standard lawyer just wants to bill hours, drafting a contract. If there's a dispute, there's an arbitration, we go to court, we settle the night before. How can we improve that process to serve our clients and this community or this movement better? And the answer is understand the needs of our clients, understand the spirit and the letter of the law, understand the enforcement priorities of the police, and understand that the judiciary system is so broken. I mean, like, good God, nobody goes to court anymore because it's a mess. And I was a litigator at the beginning of my career, and my main goal is to never go to court again. And so it's like understand what we just did in Colorado and why we did it and how to apply that to the facts so that we can, make sure that our clients are providing a good service, that they're protected, that their customers are, treated with respect, and there's everybody's safe, and there's like, for instance, if I'm advising a client on a retreat, and it may be a gray area because they're charging for the retreat, but the medicine's optional and there's no actual charge for it. How do we, but there's no insurance available for a thing like that, and you can't contract around the criminal code, but you can effectively screen your patients. You can have liability waivers and releases. You can have a medical screen to limit those sorts of risks. You can have a medical personnel on staff to, in the event that there's an issue that, they're taken care of, or they can get to a hospital in time. And, so none of those involve litigation or the cops or the courts, ideally. But yeah, that's just like kind of one example, I
Well,
guess.
that's interesting because it seems as though, as a psychedelic lawyer, you've got two big future opportunities because you might be training lawyers about how to think about the law and also how to think about the practice of law going forward, especially now technology is, because the other side of law at the moment is this obsession with AI and how technology is, yeah, don't get me on that topic, but it's rushing forward at 1,000,000 miles an hour with mainly really boring same products, contract products that they've been producing for the last 50 years. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Those are
You
for
and
the
I know
lawyers
that.
that
You and
got
I know
those
that. But I
got
mean,
like CDs in their in law school, and are still reviewing contracts. Like, real lawyers don't do that anymore.
yeah.
I mean, if and,
So, I
and
mean, do you
sorry, get
think
off.
that it's, for those people who have got themselves involved with the Psychedelic Bar Association early on, there's a real education component about how to think about the wider aspect of law within the US initially?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not going to beat the drum of decolonize everything, but let's be real. There was a history of, let's call it 1,000 years of um, European countries, not all of them, some much worse than others, sailing around the world and killing indigenous people and taking effectively their intellectual property and saying it was theirs, and then
And saying we're
imposing.
doing this because this is the law.
Right, and then imposing systems on them that they
Yeah.
never agreed to. And America did that too in Hawaii and in Alaska not that long ago. So America is not typically known as like a colonizer, but we definitely have an
I know
empire.
it does it
We do
plenty
it
around the world
economically.
using
Yeah, we do
as an
it.
ecosystem.
Yeah, we do it economically and
Yeah.
with the help of other colonial powers. And so, if you think about just the existence of systems of law that nobody agreed to be subject to or voted on or whatever, that's something that we need to like rethink. Even like the existence of intellectual property is actually like taken for granted, but our current system of IP with trademarks and copyrights and patents is really not that old and has actually been rejected over history several times. My friend Laurel Kilgore from the Psychedelic Bar Association wrote a paper and has given a couple talks on decolonizing patent law, and it's not stuff that you learn in law school, but they're absolutely true historical facts. And looking at the world and our economy and our profession through a different lens, through the lens of different cultures, folks from the global South, folks who have not benefited from these systems. I think gives you an appreciation for we need to do things differently. And lawyers, for better or for, I mean, Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers. He wasn't saying that lawyers are bad. He was saying that lawyers will get in the way of people, doing what they want. So, I think we're still to an extent looked at as sources of authority and expertise. And so let's do that. We should be that for a society that is in trouble.
Yeah, because there's been a reasonable amount of talk about somehow understanding indigenous legal systems around the world, but really it's all talk and not much action, isn't it?
So far, yeah, because this is definitely, we're at the very beginning of a thing, and it's an uphill battle to convince the powers that be, systems and institutions and people that are benefiting from these extractive practices and ways of being, to convince them that, like, hey, we're kind of all in this together. If COVID didn't show you that, then I don't know what will. Climate change and unrest and virtually
climate change. Nobody wants to talk about that one anymore.
Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about
the falls apart.
Rejecting these exploitative systems. And I'd like to think that we're smart enough as a species to do something before it's too late. But I've also
you're
seen
American, I'm English. I don't think we're smart enough.
I know. So I mean, if the ship's going down, then we should legalize drugs and have a good time while we're at it. But I don't think it's too late. I think we could probably, with the help of some of these very powerful medicines, change the minds of some influential people and start making some changes. Now, I also know how naive that sounds, because you give some of these megalomaniac oligarch billionaires.
That was my point. We haven't got much time to run, but I always have a problem with people who have taken psychedelics for the first time in their 50s after they've earned hundreds of millions of dollars, and they have this moment of realization, and it's only their realization that's going to change everything for better. I think we've all heard that one before.
Yeah. And those people, maybe they need to hear it again and again or something like that. Or maybe they need to hear from their kids, or their spouse or whatever. But I was brought up Episcopalian and kind of like a mildly religious family, but it never really resonated with me. So in my 30s, I converted to Buddhism, and there's a couple different schools of Buddhism, and one is Theravada, and that's primarily concerned with your personal enlightenment. And Mahayana Buddhism is more concerned with collective enlightenment. Everybody on board. Nobody gets, we're not leaving until everybody's on the bus. And I feel like that's the approach that we need. This all hands on deck towards collective liberation. Because I've seen in the psychedelic community, when we're at our best, that what's possible when you get just a bunch of people from different backgrounds and cultures and religions and ethnicities and skin colors and things all together, all focused on one cause. It is so much fun, and it's the most rewarding thing I've done in my career up to this point. And so I think if we can just extrapolate that to larger society, beginning in this community and being an example to how we can actually be different, then I think that's that's the whole Burning Man ethos too, right? It's like, what would society look like if we built it from scratch, and whether it's because we have to or we are just, it's a thought experiment. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's because it's the beginning of the year and I just got back from yoga. I'm feeling good, and I just feel like maybe there's a chance. I know how this is going to sound, and a lot of people are very worried about the Trump presidency 2.0. I am too, but we've done this before. We know what it's like, with this guy in office.